Welcome back to Coravanta. Today's conversation revolves around the fallout surrounding Blake Lively after the explosive legal battle and public controversy connected to Justin Baldoni. And now that the noise is finally beginning to die down, people are starting to notice something interesting happening quietly in Hollywood. It is not loud. It is not dramatic press conferences or celebrities publicly attacking each other. Instead, it is the kind of silence that says everything without saying a word. One by one, actors connected to It Ends With Us seem to be quietly stepping away from Blake Lively, removing traces of support, deleting old posts, avoiding interviews about her, and pretending the entire situation never existed. That in itself tells a huge story about how Hollywood actually works behind the scenes. People love to pretend the entertainment industry runs on loyalty and friendships, but when careers, reputations, money, and public opinion are involved, self-preservation always wins. And honestly, this situation is proving that in real time. Brendan Sleaner deleting his public support for Blake was one of the clearest examples yet. At one point, he sounded completely convinced she was telling the truth. He publicly encouraged everyone to read the complaint, acting as if the case against Baldoni was undeniable. Back then, supporting Blake seemed like the safest thing to do. Nobody expected the story to turn the way it did. Nobody expected Baldoni's side to release evidence, messages, timelines, and responses that completely shifted public perception. Suddenly, people who confidently stood beside Blake were left in an uncomfortable position because the internet never forgets. Every statement stays online forever. Every Instagram story gets screenshotted. Every tweet survives somewhere. And now those same celebrities who rushed to support her are quietly trying to disappear from the conversation without admitting they may have judged things too early. That is probably the most fascinating part of this entire saga. Nobody wants to openly attack Blake Lively because she is still powerful, still connected, still influential in Hollywood. But at the same time, fewer and fewer people seem willing to publicly defend her anymore. It is almost like everyone realized the safest move is to simply stay silent and wait for the controversy to fade away. Brendan Sleaner's silence speaks louder than any interview could. The same thing applies to Isabella Ferrer, who ended up in a terrible position through no fault of her own. Imagine being a young actress finally getting a huge opportunity in Hollywood. You land a role playing the younger version of Blake Lively in a major adaptation. You probably think your career just changed forever. You are calling family members excited, believing you are entering a dream situation surrounded by successful stars. Then suddenly the film becomes attached to one of the ugliest celebrity controversies in recent years. Of course, she supported Blake in the beginning. Most people probably would have. Blake was the established celebrity with influence, status, and media support. From Isabella's perspective, why would she assume Blake was lying? Why would she question the person who essentially represented opportunity and career advancement for her? But now things look very different. Public opinion shifted hard once more details surfaced. The legal claims started collapsing. The judge reportedly dismissed most of Blake's claims, and instead of a dramatic courtroom victory, the situation ended in a settlement that left many people confused about what actually happened. That is where the uncomfortable gray area begins. Because now people are left trying to figure out what they even believe anymore. Some people still fully support Blake. Others think Baldoni was unfairly targeted from the beginning. And many celebrities connected to the project appear to have landed somewhere in the middle where they simply no longer want anything to do with the drama at all. That quiet quitting behavior has become the defining feature of this fallout. Nobody wants to risk their own reputation by choosing the wrong side publicly anymore. In Hollywood, reputation is currency, and once a situation becomes toxic, distancing yourself becomes survival. The interesting thing is that even silence becomes a statement. When celebrities stop liking posts, stop mentioning someone in interviews, remove old pictures, or suddenly avoid discussing a former co-star entirely, audiences notice immediately. Fans read between the lines. Entertainment culture today revolves around decoding subtle behavior. And right now the subtle behavior surrounding Blake Lively says more than any press release ever could. At the same time, there is also a bigger conversation happening underneath all of this regarding public accusations, workplace misconduct claims, and the future of movements like Me Too. A lot of people online are asking whether this controversy damages public trust when women come forward with allegations. Some are even claiming this situation could push society backward by making people more skeptical of future accusations. Personally, that feels like the wrong lesson to take from all this. Every case should stand on its own evidence, circumstances, and facts. One complicated celebrity controversy should not suddenly erase years of progress regarding workplace accountability or discourage victims from speaking up. But at the same time, situations like this also remind people why due process matters and why instant public destruction before evidence surfaces can become dangerous. That balance is incredibly difficult in the age of social media because public opinion moves at lightning speed. The internet decides guilt within hours now. Careers can collapse overnight before anyone even sees documentation, testimony, or responses. That is why comments from actors like Cate Blanchett recently sparked so much discussion. She spoke about the complexity of public scandals, accountability, atonement, and the way society reacts when hidden behavior becomes exposed. Her perspective was actually more thoughtful than many people expected because she acknowledged something uncomfortable but true. People are imperfect, people evolve, and not every controversy exists in simple black and white categories. Sometimes people genuinely change. Sometimes they apologize and grow. Sometimes they learn from mistakes. Other times they continue abusing power repeatedly without remorse. Distinguishing between those scenarios matters. Blanchett essentially argued that accountability should involve examining not only the individual accused of wrongdoing, but also the systems and people surrounding them who enabled that behavior. That idea resonates deeply in Hollywood, where power networks often protect influential figures for years until public pressure becomes impossible to ignore. At the same time, audiences struggle with where to draw the line between forgiveness and permanent cancellation. In today's culture, one scandal can follow someone forever regardless of context, growth, or nuance. Yet there are also undeniably serious cases where public rejection becomes completely justified. The challenge is figuring out how society should respond consistently without swinging too far in either direction. The Blake Lively controversy exposed how quickly public narratives can shift once competing evidence enters the conversation. In the beginning, many people instinctively believed Blake because celebrity culture conditioned audiences to immediately support accusations against powerful men. Then Baldoni's side responded aggressively with their own evidence, and suddenly public opinion reversed almost overnight. Now many observers feel burned by the entire process because they realize how easily emotions and media narratives can manipulate perception before facts fully emerge. Hat does not mean legitimate victims should stop being believed. It simply means accusations should be taken seriously while investigations unfold carefully instead of instantly turning social media into judge, jury, and executioner. Unfortunately, online culture rarely allows patience anymore. Everything becomes tribal immediately. People pick teams before details even exist. If you question one side, you are accused of betrayal. If you ask for evidence, you are called insensitive. If you wait for more information, people claim you are enabling abuse. Nuance disappears completely. And when the truth eventually becomes more complicated than the original headlines suggested, nobody really knows how to handle the fallout. That is exactly what happened here. The internet initially framed Blake as the victim and Baldoni as the villain. Then additional information surfaced, the legal case weakened, and now many celebrities who publicly defended Blake are quietly retreating because they no longer feel confident standing behind their earlier statements. But rather than openly acknowledging they may have spoken too soon, most of them are simply disappearing from the conversation altogether. That silence feels strategic. Nobody wants to admit misjudgment publicly because Hollywood remembers everything. Careers are built on relationships, alliances, and public image management. One wrong statement can follow an actor for years. Meanwhile, Blake herself faces a complicated future. Even if she maintains loyal fans, there is now undeniable damage surrounding her reputation within sections of the public. Studios pay attention to controversy because controversy affects profitability. Actors pay attention because nobody wants to become attached to a project overshadowed by non-stop headlines. And audiences absolutely pay attention because celebrity culture today operates almost like reality television, where personal behavior becomes inseparable from professional success. The question now is not whether Blake can still work in Hollywood. Of course she can. She remains famous, wealthy, connected, and recognizable worldwide. The real question is whether the industry enthusiasm surrounding her has permanently weakened. Once public trust cracks, rebuilding it becomes extremely difficult, especially when people sense manipulation or dishonesty. What makes this situation even more fascinating is how different celebrities respond to scandals depending on their level of power. Someone like Taylor Swift, for example, has enough influence to completely control the terms of collaborations, business partnerships, and creative projects. If she dislikes someone's reputation, she can simply avoid working with them forever without consequences to her own career. But lesser-known actors or rising stars do not always have that luxury. Sometimes they accept roles or projects despite controversies because they need opportunities. Hollywood is full of compromises like that. The audience often imagines moral decisions are easy when in reality careers, finances, contracts, and survival all influence those choices behind the scenes. And that brings us back to the larger issue underneath the Blake Lively fallout. This controversy became symbolic of something much bigger than one celebrity dispute. It exposed how unstable public opinion has become, how quickly media narratives can change, and how dangerous internet-driven outrage cycles can be for everyone involved. It also showed how fragile celebrity alliances truly are. The second public support becomes risky, people vanish. Loyalty in Hollywood often lasts only as long as it remains professionally beneficial. Once the tide changes, silence replaces solidarity almost immediately. Even now, you can already feel people trying to mentally move on from the entire saga despite how huge it once seemed online. That happens with almost every modern controversy. The outrage burns intensely for months, dominates headlines, fuels endless commentary videos and podcasts. Then eventually the public gets exhausted and shifts attention elsewhere. But the long-term consequences remain for the people directly involved. Blake's image has changed permanently for many viewers. Baldoni's reputation survived in ways few initially expected. Supporting actors got caught in crossfire they probably never imagined when signing on to the project. And audiences were reminded once again that celebrity narratives are rarely as simple as they first appear in the Hollywood discussion. There were also bizarre internet stories exploding at the same time, proving once again how strange modern media culture has become. One viral case involved a social media personality known mostly for looksmaxing content who somehow ended up at the center of a legal situation involving a dead alligator. Yes, seriously. The story sounded so ridiculous people initially thought it was satire. But what truly pushed the situation into full internet absurdity was the online obsession with the judge assigned to the case. Social media users became convinced the influencer's legal team intentionally arranged for his case to appear before an attractive judge, as if the court system operates like reality television casting. The rumor spread so fast that lawyers actually had to publicly deny manipulating the assignment process. The entire thing felt like proof that online culture now turns literally everything into entertainment content, no matter how serious or bizarre the underlying issue might be. And honestly, that same transformation of serious events into spectacle partially explains why celebrity controversies spiral so aggressively now too. People no longer consume news traditionally. Everything becomes content. Every lawsuit becomes a fandom war. Every statement becomes meme material. Every courtroom development becomes an opportunity for engagement farming across TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and X. The line between journalism and entertainment keeps disappearing, which creates an environment where outrage becomes profitable. And once outrage becomes profitable, people stop slowing down long enough to verify facts carefully. That atmosphere made the Blake Lively controversy even more explosive because audiences approached it almost like serialized entertainment instead of a real legal and personal conflict involving actual reputations and careers. Every update became another episode. Fans picked heroes and villains. Commentary channels dissected body language, interviews, and social media posts frame by frame. People treated subtle Instagram activity like criminal evidence. In some ways, it revealed how deeply internet culture now shapes public perception before official conclusions ever arrive. And yet, despite all the chaos, confusion, and endless online arguments, the final outcome left many people unsatisfied because there was never a dramatic courtroom resolution delivering absolute clarity. Instead, there was settlement language, dismissed claims, PR spin, and silence. That ambiguity frustrates audiences because people crave definitive endings. They want one side completely vindicated and the other completely destroyed. Real life rarely works that way. Most controversies end messily with unresolved questions lingering forever. Now, as the dust settles, Hollywood seems to be quietly recalibrating around Blake Lively. Not openly attacking her. Not fully embracing her either. Just slowly creating distance. And in an industry built almost entirely on perception, distance can become one of the loudest statements possible. As the Blake Lively controversy slowly fades from daily headlines, another conversation has started taking shape underneath it, and that conversation has less to do with celebrity gossip and more to do with trust, power, politics, media influence, and the strange world people now live in where everything feels connected through outrage. One minute the internet is discussing Hollywood actors quietly distancing themselves from a co-star, and the next minute people are debating war, insider trading, elections, corruption, inflation, and whether ordinary citizens are being manipulated by both politicians and celebrities at the same time. That is really the atmosphere right now. Nobody trusts institutions anymore. Nobody trusts media narratives completely. Nobody believes powerful people are being fully honest. And whether you are talking about Hollywood or Washington, the same underlying frustration keeps appearing everywhere. People feel like they are constantly watching elites protect themselves while ordinary people deal with the consequences. That frustration exploded again during the major Kentucky election that suddenly became one of the most talked about political races in the country. On paper, it was just another congressional election. But in reality, it became symbolic of a much larger civil war happening inside American politics itself. Thomas Massie found himself positioned as one of the few Republicans openly resisting parts of Donald Trump's agenda, especially regarding government spending, military escalation, and transparency issues connected to things like the Epstein files. That immediately made him a target. In modern politics, disagreement inside your own party is often treated as betrayal rather than independent thinking. Instead of debating policy differences calmly, political figures now frame internal opposition almost like wartime sabotage. And that was obvious from the language being used against Massie. Pete Hegseth showing up to campaign against him felt surreal to many observers because here was the Secretary of Defense, a man responsible for military leadership during international tensions, spending time aggressively attacking another American politician over loyalty to Trump. The messaging itself sounded less like democratic debate and more like military propaganda. Every speech revolved around war fighters, missions, unity, and standing behind leadership without questioning orders. It created this strange atmosphere where politics stopped sounding like governance and started sounding like battlefield rhetoric. That worries a lot of people because democracies depend on disagreement. They depend on debate. They depend on elected officials occasionally standing against presidents, including presidents from their own party. But increasingly, loyalty to political personalities matters more than loyalty to constitutional principles. Thomas Massie became controversial specifically because he kept voting against bloated spending bills and military involvement many conservatives once claimed to oppose. Years ago, skepticism toward foreign wars and government expansion was common among Republicans. Now politicians who hold those same positions are sometimes accused of weakening the movement simply because they refuse to support everything Trump wants automatically. That shift says a lot about how personality-driven modern politics has become. Instead of policy consistency, everything revolves around loyalty tests. And the language surrounding those loyalty tests keeps becoming more extreme. The irony is impossible to ignore. Politicians who once built entire identities around small government, constitutional freedom, and don't tread on me rhetoric now often support massive executive power as long as their preferred leader controls it. Critics see that contradiction clearly. They argue the movement transformed from anti-establishment rebellion into personality cult behavior where questioning leadership itself becomes unacceptable. Even some conservatives started openly criticizing the direction things were heading. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who rarely breaks from Trump world narratives publicly, even commented on how disturbing the obsession with absolute loyalty had become. When someone like Greene starts questioning the movement's direction, it highlights just how intense internal tensions have grown. Meanwhile, global tensions kept escalating in the background. Discussions about Iran, oil supply routes, military strikes, and international negotiations suddenly became central to everyday political conversation again. Trump announced that planned military actions against Iran were being delayed following pressure from Middle Eastern allies like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, who reportedly feared the economic and regional consequences of escalation. The statement itself sounded dramatic, almost theatrical, presenting Trump as a leader reluctantly holding back massive military force while still threatening future action if negotiations failed. But many critics interpreted the announcement differently. To them, it looked less like strategic strength and more like another example of aggressive rhetoric colliding with geopolitical reality. One of the biggest issues involved the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow shipping route responsible for a huge percentage of global oil transportation. Iran understood something important. They could not realistically defeat the United States militarily in direct confrontation, but they could absolutely create global economic pain by disrupting oil flow and regional stability. That is the modern reality of warfare. Sometimes countries do not need to win traditionally. They simply need to make conflict too expensive, chaotic, or politically damaging for the other side to continue comfortably. Oil prices started rising immediately whenever tensions increased because markets respond to fear faster than governments respond to strategy. And ordinary people always end up feeling those consequences first. Gas prices rise. Food costs increase. Inflation worsens. Everyday life becomes more expensive while political leaders deliver speeches about patriotism, strength, and global dominance. That disconnect between elite decision-makers and ordinary citizens fuels growing anger across the political spectrum. People see billions spent on military operations while healthcare, education, infrastructure, and disaster relief remain underfunded. They hear politicians talk endlessly about protecting democracy while corruption scandals continue unfolding openly. Eventually, citizens stop believing anyone genuinely represents them. That distrust intensified even further once reports surfaced regarding Trump's financial gains connected to market activity and insider information allegations. Commentators and journalists began discussing stock trades, cryptocurrency ventures, and suspicious timing surrounding certain economic decisions. One particularly awkward television moment captured public attention when financial commentators on CNBC appeared stunned while discussing how much money Trump reportedly made through trades connected to information only someone with enormous political influence would realistically possess. The silence on air became more memorable than the conversation itself because television personalities who normally have opinions about everything suddenly looked uncomfortable even acknowledging what viewers were hearing. That silence reflected something larger happening throughout media culture. Many journalists, commentators, and public figures now seem terrified of discussing certain topics too directly because backlash arrives instantly from all sides. If you criticize Trump, one audience accuses you of political bias. If you defend him, another audience accuses you of enabling corruption. If you try remaining neutral, both sides attack you anyway. Public discourse has become so polarized that many people simply avoid difficult conversations entirely. But avoiding conversations does not make underlying problems disappear. One of the most controversial revelations involved reports that Trump's Department of Justice settled a lawsuit connected to claims of political targeting by establishing an enormous taxpayer-funded compensation program. Critics argued the arrangement essentially allowed political allies connected to January 6th and related investigations to receive financial benefits funded by ordinary American households. Supporters framed it differently, claiming people unfairly targeted by the government deserved restitution. But regardless of political perspective, the optics looked terrible to many Americans already struggling financially. Families dealing with rising rent, healthcare costs, student debt, and inflation watched billions flow through political and legal systems while being told social programs were too expensive to expand. That growing resentment toward elites connects directly back to celebrity culture too. Whether discussing Hollywood stars, billionaire politicians, media executives, or corporate leaders, people increasingly feel the rules are different depending on wealth and status. Blake Lively's controversy tapped into that same emotional atmosphere because audiences believed power, PR manipulation, and influence were shaping public narratives behind the scenes. The anger was never only about one actress or one lawsuit. It reflected broader public exhaustion with carefully manufactured images and elite protection systems. At the same time, media ecosystems keep amplifying outrage because outrage drives engagement. Political commentary channels, celebrity gossip pages, partisan influencers, and entertainment podcasts all benefit financially from keeping audiences emotionally activated. Fear, anger, betrayal, and scandal generate clicks far more effectively than calm nuance. So every controversy gets pushed toward extremes. Every disagreement becomes existential. Every election becomes the most important election ever. Every celebrity dispute becomes evidence civilization itself is collapsing. That constant emotional intensity leaves people exhausted and cynical. And cynicism changes society in dangerous ways. Once people stop trusting institutions completely, they become vulnerable to manipulation from anyone promising certainty. Some retreat into partisan bubbles where every opposing opinion feels evil. Others detach entirely, convinced corruption is unavoidable no matter who holds power. Social cohesion weakens because nobody agrees on basic facts anymore. Even entertainment becomes politicized instantly. A movie casting decision turns into ideological warfare. A celebrity statement becomes national debate. Nothing stays small anymore. That is partially why the Blake Lively story fascinated people for so long. It combines celebrity culture, gender politics, public accusations, PR strategy, social media warfare, legal drama, and shifting narratives all into one giant spectacle. People projected larger cultural anxieties onto it. Supporters saw misogyny and victim blaming. Critics saw manipulation and false narratives. Neutral observers saw proof that internet outrage culture destroys nuance entirely. The case became less about the individuals involved and more about what audiences believed it represented politically and socially. Now that the immediate drama is cooling down, the long-term effects are becoming easier to spot. Some actors quietly moved on. Others vanished from the conversation entirely. Public trust fractured further. Audiences became even more skeptical of celebrity activism and carefully curated public personas. And Hollywood itself learned another lesson about how quickly public opinion can become unpredictable in the social media era. The truth is, modern fame has become incredibly unstable. Celebrities spend years building images that can collapse within weeks once controversy hits. One viral lawsuit, one leaked message, one damaging interview, or one poorly timed statement can completely reshape public perception. That instability creates paranoia throughout entertainment industries because nobody knows when they might become the next target. PR teams work non-stop trying to control narratives, but the internet moves faster than traditional image management now. Once audiences decide something feels fake, recovering authenticity becomes nearly impossible. At the same time, audiences themselves are changing too. People are more informed than ever, but also more overwhelmed than ever. They consume endless streams of information daily without enough time to verify everything carefully. Algorithms reward emotional reaction over thoughtful analysis. Outrage spreads faster than corrections. False information mixes with legitimate reporting constantly. In that environment, confusion becomes permanent. And maybe that is the real theme connecting all these stories together. Whether discussing Blake Lively, Hollywood fallout, political corruption, insider trading, war rhetoric, or media manipulation, the central issue everywhere is trust. Who deserves it? Who abuses it? Who profits from controlling narratives? And how do ordinary people figure out truth in a system where everyone seems to have incentives to distort reality? Those questions are not going away anytime soon. If anything, they are becoming more important with every passing year. Because whether people are watching celebrity interviews, election coverage, courtroom drama, or financial news, the same uncomfortable feeling keeps emerging underneath everything. The sense that powerful people live by entirely different rules while the public is left sorting through confusion afterward. For now, the dust continues settling around Blake Lively and the wider chaos surrounding that entire saga. Hollywood moves on quickly because it always does. Another controversy will replace this one eventually. Another scandal will dominate headlines. Another celebrity feud will flood social media timelines. But the conversations sparked by this situation regarding public belief, accountability, media narratives, and institutional trust will likely continue long after people stop discussing the original lawsuit itself. And maybe that is the strangest part of modern culture. Stories no longer truly end. They just fade temporarily before transforming into part of a larger ongoing argument about power, truth, and who controls the narrative in the first place. That is where things stand now. This has been Coravanta.